Good morning. I call this hearing to order. Thank you all for being here with us this morning as we discuss legislation to reauthorize the Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR, and the Small Business Technology Transfer, or STTR, programs. I'd especially like to express my gratitude to each of the witnesses who have taken time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. And on a personal note, I would also like to thank Chairman Graves for giving me the opportunity as a freshman to chair this subcommittee. That was very generous of him, and the staff as well. They are so incredibly helpful, and it's an honor to be sitting in this position, especially since this is my very first subcommittee. So thank you all, and I will remember you always very fondly. Small businesses are a major driver of high technology, innovation, and economic growth in the United States, generating significant new jobs, new markets, and high growth industries. In this era of globalization, optimizing the ability of small businesses to develop the commercialize new, highly innovative products is essential for U.S. competitiveness and national security. This is why programs like SBIR and STTR are so important. Created in 1982, the SBIR program was designed to increase the participation of small, high-tech businesses, firms, and federal R&D endeavors. The driving force behind its creation was predicted upon the belief that while technology-based companies under 500 employees tended to be highly innovative, the innovation is essential to the economic well-being of the United States. These businesses were underrepresented in government R&D activities. By including qualified small businesses in the nation's R&D effort, SBIR grants and contracts stimulate innovative new technologies to help agencies meet the specific research and development needs of the nation in a wide variety of areas, including health, energy solutions, and defense. It has been said that nobody has a patent on good new ideas. While that is true, it can be difficult for an innovator or a small company with limited resources to take that idea and manufacture it into a new product or process. Programs like SBIR provide a bridge between product conception and marketability, a step of vital importance for innovative ideas to become reality. The new technologies and discoveries that come out of this program go a long way and keep the competitive edge in the world marketplace. And the SBIR program is the kind of public-private partnership that is essential to the continued growth of our economy. In 2007, the National Research Council, NRC, of the National Academies of Science completed one of the most comprehensive examinations of the SBIR program. The study found that the SBIR program provides substantial benefits for participating small businesses at all agencies in a number of different ways. According to the NRC study, the SBIR program is a significant job creation engine, a considerable factor in the founding of new companies, helps to provide partnering and networking opportunities for small businesses, and provides the impetus to start projects that otherwise would not have gotten off the ground. There is a very strong case for reauthorization of the SBIR and STTR programs. The discussion draft of legislation to reauthorize these programs that we have before us goes a long way toward modernizing and improving the SBIR program. They have a proven track record of creating jobs, advancing innovative science in the marketplace, and solving federal agency problems. Our legislative goal is to strengthen these programs to ensure efficient use of taxpayer dollars that help create more jobs by targeting the best science. Moreover, the bill does not cost anything, but rather sets aside 2.5% of all federal extramural research dollars for small businesses to compete for. Among other things, the draft would reauthorize the SBIR and STTR programs for 3 years increase Phase 1 and Phase 2 award sizes for both programs, allow for greater participation of small companies regardless of their financial structure, and enhance data collection for the programs to help us provide accurate and consistent oversight. Again, thank you all for being here today. I am eager to hear the testimony of our witnesses, and I look forward to working with you. Ranking Member Richmond and Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Velasquez of the full committee to reauthorize these important programs. I now yield to Ranking Member Richmond for his opening statements.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellmners. First, let me thank all of the witnesses for being here, Dr. Koenig, Dr. Link, Dr. Brewer, and Mr. Norum, for taking time out and coming to testify today on an issue that is very important and has the ability to continue to move this country forward, not just in terms of innovation, but the products that are created and the technology that's developed make this country a better place, saves lives, and all of those things that are very important to us. Not only that, but it also creates jobs. So thank you for doing that. And Madam Chairwoman, small businesses have always been our nation's greatest innovators, developing new products and technologies, whether it's new computer software or life-saving medicine. Small firms are vital to the technological breakthroughs that keep America competitive. The Small Business Innovation Research Program has been an important mechanism for enlisting small firms to meet the U.S. government's research needs. In my home state of Louisiana, entrepreneurs are receiving SBIR grants from NASA to work on geographic mapping technologies, from Homeland Security to improve disaster response, and from the National Science Foundation to improve online distribution of video content. Just yesterday, I met with the president of Tulane University, Dr. Scott Cowan, who's also in my district, that informed me that their commercialization efforts are currently underway at Tulane thanks to SBIR. In addition to Tulane, in my district, the New Orleans Bio Innovation Center acts as a business incubator, helping budding entrepreneurs turn ideas into products. The Bio Innovation Center is a cornerstone of Louisiana's commitment to nurturing biotechnology within the state. It is a component entity of a larger leadership of the Greater New Orleans Biosciences Economic Development District, now referred to simply as the Bio District New Orleans. Beneficiaries of the work done in New Orleans Bio District have made it clear that a sustained, longer-term reauthorization of SBIR is a priority for their membership. It's also a priority for me. The discussion draft before the committee represents an important first step in moving forward to reauthorize this initiative. How we go about modernizing SBIR will determine whether small firms continue making these kinds of valuable contributions to the American economy. As we develop this legislation and begin working with our Senate counterparts, we should keep a number of goals in mind for the program. I have a central focus when it comes to SBIR. It is vitally important to reach an agreement that prioritizes a long-term reauthorization. The frequent short-term reauthorizations are disruptive to the planning efforts of SBIR stakeholders. The program is a proven job creator and a growth engine for small business. It is time to move forward. I am satisfied that the draft bill, which we will be discussing today, mostly addresses my priorities with the SBIR program. I have identified other areas where I believe the bill could be strengthened. As the legislative process moves forward, I warmly embrace the opportunity to work with my colleagues and our chairwoman on both sides to make sure that this piece of legislation can be one that the SBIR stakeholders are proud of. Madam Chairwoman, risk-taking and innovation are prized values in America's entrepreneurial culture. Some of the most significant technological advancements that forever changed how we live our lives were developed not in the laboratories of big corporations, but in the backyards and garages of entrepreneurs. The SBIR program is an important tool for fueling this creativity and, in the process, creating new jobs. During the recession, while big companies were laying off its employees, it is estimated that the SBIR program helped spark the creation of more than 1,300 new enterprises. As the U.S. economy regains its footing, innovation will be crucial, and SBIR grants can be a key ingredient in that equation. For all those reasons, it is important that why we're taking the painstaking care to reauthorize this program in a manner that works for our nation's small businesses. I look forward to a thorough discussion today of the draft legislation, and I want to thank the witnesses again for testifying. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and it's going to be a pleasure serving on this subcommittee with you. Thank you so much. If additional members have an opening statement prepared, I ask that they be submitted for the record. I'd also like to take a moment to explain to you the timing light system. You will each have 5 minutes to deliver your testimony. The light will start out as green. When you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow. Finally, it will turn red at the end of your 5 minutes. I ask that you try to keep to this time limit, but I will be lenient if we're close to finishing, so thank you. Okay, at this moment, I'd like to start off with Mr. Glenn Norum. He serves as Executive Chairman and co-founder of TOTUS Solutions. I'm hoping I said that correctly. Okay, Incorporated. His company provides advanced lighting and security solutions for safety, security, and surveillance applications, primarily to government agencies. Mr. Norum has also served as Executive Chairman of EE Parts Incorporated. Since founding the company in 1999, he received a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Sciences and System Engineering from Southern Illinois University and an MBA from University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Ellmners and Ranking Member Richmond, members of the subcommittee, and ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be up here before you, and I commend your committee for the contributions that you've had to the growth of our economy, the creation of new jobs, and to fostering innovation in the United States. Thank you for the introduction. TOTUS was founded in April of 2009. We manufacture intelligent lighting-based security platforms that are deployed and established in electronic security grids to protect the citizens of our country, to strengthen our defenses, and to improve the response to incidents in their jurisdictions. I'm also the founder of EE Parts, a supply chain services company with operations in Texas and in China. I co-founded Viewcast prior to that, provider of streaming media technologies. Prior to Viewcast, I was a general partner of 2 successful venture capital firms focused on early stage and startup investments. TOTUS was started by 2 serial entrepreneurs, again, to build these security platforms. It's an integration of secure wireless communications, video surveillance, and sensor monitoring arrays. The surveillance and sensor grids enable customers to provide an advanced level of physical security to their installations and superior response to incidents that occur in their jurisdictions. I also representing the Austin Chamber of Commerce. The Austin Chamber represents a 5-county region in central Texas and more than 2,400 businesses with a wide range of industries and sizes. Entrepreneurs' innovation and access to capital. Certainly not all small businesses require investment capital from third-party resources to be successful, and many successful firms have been built solely with money from friends and family and from individual investors. However, many emerging growth companies require significantly more capital, and they'll receive that from 1 or more venture capital funds. It's been my professional experience that the relationship between entrepreneurs and the venture capital professionals has contributed to unparalleled success of innovation and jobs for our nation in the last 30 years. The seeds of our nation's venture capital industry actually began with the Small Business Administration and their SBIC programs in the 1970s. Venture-backed companies generally benefit from both the venture capital's money, their investment, and the business development expertise of their professionals, as the entrepreneurs strive to grow our businesses in today's fast-paced, globally competitive environment. The SBIR program has fostered innovation and new job creation, and it's important to TOTUS, as it is with many other small businesses in this country, because it keeps us, enables us to stay close to our federal agencies, such as the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, to create solutions to meet the critical needs of their organizations and the missions to protect our citizens. The SBIR program is a powerful catalyzer for innovation and the driver of the American economy. As an example of that, my co-founder and colleague, Stephen Chin, previously founded 3ETI. It was a recipient of Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 SBIR grants, which led to the invention and commercialization of the first FIPS 140 secure wireless technologies, products that were used by Department of Defense and other U.S. agencies. Historically, our country has benefited greatly from the successes of our entrepreneurs as they grew new businesses, high-tech businesses with innovative products, creating new companies, new industries, and new jobs that have been proven to be vital to our economy. New company formation and access to capital has been difficult in the last few years. To fulfill our ambitious goals, new companies like TOTUS require both talent and investment capital. In the formative stages, the investments need to be secured before the firm recruits talent. Unfortunately for Texas, the current SBIR rules handicap our access to investment capital by prohibiting our participation in the SBIR program if we accept venture capital investment. While we've been successful in raising debt and equity capital from individuals, the highly visible stock market crashes of the last decade have had a negative effect on individual investors that have historically provided angel capital. What that means for TOTUS, like many other small businesses hindered by the current situation, is that we spend more executive time and resources raising capital, which translates to slower growth for our businesses and limits the creation of new jobs. In conclusion, it's most confounding to me that the venture capital supported companies have been barred from participating in the SBIR program, because the entrepreneurs, the SBIR program, and the venture capital community at large have been solidly aligned in their interest in commercializing technology, in their missions of spurring innovation, and in the growth of new commercially successful businesses. It's well understood that entrepreneurs and their companies are dependent on access to capital, and no other single factor more thoroughly determines whether a business will be successful. I trust that my comments have reaffirmed both the value of the SBIR program and the need to remove barriers or obstacles to access to capital for entrepreneurs as we seek to secure capital from all available sources. Thank you for this opportunity to appear before the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Norum. Next, we have Dr. Terry Brewer, who is president and founder of Brewer Science, headquartered in Rolla, Missouri. Founded in 1981, Brewer Science is is the discoverer of original solutions for the world's leading manufacturers of computer chips, sensors, LEDs, displays, and other microelectronics devices. Under his leadership, Brewer Science has grown from only 3 to 300 employees. Dr. Brewer has served on many boards and committees, particularly related to the area of education. He is one of the founders of Jordan Valley Innovation Center and serves on the board of Springfield Innovation Incorporated. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Brewer.
All right. Good morning, Chairwoman Ellmners, Ranking Member Richmond, and the members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today to discuss the impact and the value of the SBIR program. I am Terry Brewer. I'm president of Brewer Science Incorporated in Rolla, Missouri, and I'm appearing here today as a founder and owner of a small business that sustains high technology innovation. I founded Brewer Science in 1981 and based it in Rolla, Missouri. Brewer Science is a major innovator of high technology processes used to create ultra-small circuits that enable devices such as tablet computers, from which I'm talking, smartphones, digital cameras, flat panel devices, and LEDs. The stringent requirements of these products provide Brewer Science with opportunities to leverage the company's knowledge and creative capabilities to provide the needed advanced technologies for both government and private sectors. Our product line encompasses unique chemicals, processes, and equipment that are used to give devices more capability in less space at a lower cost. Like many entrepreneurs, I started the company with a novel concept, but with little cash. By using another company's extra lab space, creating a unique business approach, and accessing the support of programs like SBIR, Brewer Science has grown to nearly 300 employees. We're now the largest private employer in Phelps and the surrounding counties, Missouri, with sales offices all across Asia and Europe to access worldwide markets with our U.S. manufactured products. Additionally, we are making significant headway in the development of next generation of semiconductors using breakthrough processes and materials such as carbon nanotubes in our facilities in Rolla and Springfield, Missouri. Over the past 30 years, this small, privately held, high-tech company located in a rural Missouri has grown into a strong innovator and exporter of products used by every major integrated circuit corporation in the world. We have participated in the SBR program with a high degree of success, including the commercialization of multiple disruptive technologies. The global competitors from countries that provide large government subsidies for the research and development programs require us to utilize programs such as SBR, which now is needed more than ever. The founders of the SBR program had a great vision to support and grow a true national treasure, innovation generated and sustained by American small business. In fact, American small businesses have become the most powerful, innovating force on earth. And it is this ability to not only invent, but to provide sustained innovation that is the hallmark of this effort. Since receiving our first SBR award in 1984, the microelectronics industry has benefited from many Brewer Science technologies facilitated by the program. It has helped us create and sustain high-value jobs en route to influencing the development of modern electronic devices as we know them today. So how do you calculate the impact of Brewer Science and its effect on the microelectronics industry? It's really not possible. From local jobs to advances in global microelectronics, Brewer Science innovations have made a difference in the way we live. But we are only one example of how funded innovation drives this kind of change. There are many more stories like ours that also confirm the value of the SBR program. In driving this change, it is important to distinguish between science and innovation. While appropriate science contributes to meaningful innovation, the value of the SBR program is more than just finding the best science. Science does not create jobs. Businesses focused on sustainable innovation and development do create jobs. The founders are right. Small business innovation research empowers government funding to move great innovations forward to solve technical challenges through commercialization and manufacturing, thereby achieving economic growth. The founders of the SBR program intended for American small business to generate jobs and technical growth. However, investment firms driven strictly for financial gain are not always aligned with this focus. I recognize that monetary support is critical for small business growth. But while investment firms can provide support for small businesses, their drive and purpose may not always align with SBR objectives. Any changes in the SBR legislation should be sensitive to these concerns. In conclusion, the visionaries of the SBR program anticipated the increasing need for sustained innovation from the U.S. small businesses. As our nation struggles with challenging economic times, there is no better vehicle to get us through than American small business innovation. No better vehicle. While there are differences and distractions associated with the passage of this bill, I encourage the subcommittee to remember the essence of what this program supports and how valuable SBIR is to supporting these efforts. That essence is the creation of technology-based jobs in the United States.
Thank you, Dr. Brewer. Thank you for your testimony. I now yield to Ranking Member Richmond, who will introduce our next witness.
Madam Chairwoman, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Albert Link. Dr. Link is a professor of economics at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro with a focus in science and technology policy. He received his Ph.D. in economics from Tulane University and is currently the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Technology Transfer. He has written many articles on the SBIR program, and Dr. Link is a member of the research team for the National Research Council's Committee for Capitalizing on Science, Technology, and Innovation, an assessment of the Small Business Innovation Research Program. So as a Tulane graduate, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Link. Dr. Link.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Chairwoman Ellmners, Ranking Member Richmond, and members of the subcommittee. The pollen season has arrived in North Carolina, so if you would excuse me. It is a privilege to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity. The observations that I offer to you this morning are more general than those from Mr. Norum and Dr. Brewer. The insight that they offer from a company perspective is enlightening and extremely important. If I may speak at a more general level, the SBIR program has had, and I expect it to continue to have, a significant impact on the technological foundation of our economy, thus reinforcing the economy's potential for continued and sustained growth. Defending this statement is not difficult at an aggregate level. The evidence is clear that the benefits to society outweigh the costs of the program. In other words, a benefit-cost analysis calculated under very conservative assumptions shows that the ratio of social benefits to SBIR funding costs far exceeds 1. Turning to two specifics, employment growth and commercialized new technologies, both of which are of economic importance and both of which are directly linked to SBIR funding. After I briefly remark on each, I will comment on the common thread between them, namely Phase 3 funding. Employment growth is not an explicit objective of the SBIR program, but it is definitely an important issue, especially in the current economic environment. The average annual rate of employment growth in SBIR-funded companies over the past decade has far exceeded the growth rate of the economy as a whole. The average rate of employment growth among, for example, NIH-funded companies has been about 11% per year, and this estimate does not take into account employment growth associated with those companies that purchase innovations created by the funded companies. Also, across agencies, employment growth has increased by about 30 persons per $1 million of SBIR funding. Employment growth varies among companies, excuse me, and it is greatest among those that have patented their intellectual property and have acquired Phase 3 funding. Controlling for these effects, there do not appear to be differences in employment growth among companies that are owned by women and/or minorities compared to other companies. But women and/or minority companies tend to patent their intellectual property less often. Commercializing new technology funded by SBIR is an explicit objective of the program, and about 50% of the funded projects reach the commercialization stage. The probability of commercializing a new technology also varies among companies, and it is greatest among those that have acquired Phase 3 funding and who have partnered with a university. And I suspect that partnering with a national laboratory would bring about the same result. And controlling for these effects on the likelihood of commercialization, again, there do not appear to be differences among women and minority-owned companies compared to other companies. The magnitude of the effect of Phase 3 funding on the probability of commercializing a new technology is noteworthy. Again, if I may draw from NIH as an example, the probability of commercialization nearly doubles when Phase 3 funding is available. Phase 3 funding thus has an economic importance to SBIR-funded companies. It's correlated with employment growth and commercialization, and the two are related. In conclusion, thank you again, Chairwoman Ellmners, Ranking Member Richmond, and members of the committee for the opportunity to offer these observations on the overall economic importance of the program. I strongly encourage the committee to move toward a reauthorization of the program and to include in that reauthorization continued evaluation studies of the program with an emphasis on any economic consequences associated with changes in the economic environment or in the composition of applicant and recipient companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Link, for your testimony. Our last distinguished panel member is Dr. Scott Koenig, who is the chairman of the Board of Directors at Applied Genetic Therapy Corporation, a private biotechnology company developing genetics. Dr. Koenig is a board member of the Biotechnology Industry Association, as well as a member of its Emerging Companies Section governing body. Dr. Koenig is also a board member of the Children's Research Institute at the Children's National Medical Center. He received his AB and PhD from Cornell University and his MD from University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. He completed his residency in internal medicine at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania and is board certified in internal medicine and allergy and immunology. Dr. Link, you could probably discuss this with Dr. Koenig. I too suffer as a fellow North Carolinian. Welcome to the subcommittee, Dr. Koenig.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairwoman Ellmners, Ranking Member Richmond, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen. I'm President and CEO of Macrogenics and Chairman of the Board of Applied Genetics Technology Corporation. I'm appearing before the committee on behalf of the Biotechnology Industry Organization, which represents more than 1,200 companies, academic institutions, state biotechnology centers, and related organizations in all 50 states. I'm a scientist, physician, and entrepreneur, and I've worked at the NIH and in the biotechnology industry for the past 27 years. During my career, I have held positions including Senior Vice President of Research at MedImmune, co-founder and CEO of Macrogenics, and board director of AGTC. During this time, I've been involved in the development of multiple biological products, such as a therapy to prevent a fatal viral illness in premature infants, a vaccine to prevent cervical cancer, and a number of other promising therapeutics still in development to treat juvenile diabetes, West Nile virus infections, and many types of cancers. I have seen the importance and impact of the SBIR program in the biotechnology industry, but sadly, from my perspective, current rules have inhibited the growth and survival of small private biotechnology companies and the development of promising technologies and products due to the inability of the venture-backed companies to participate in the SBIR program. Let me illustrate examples of each, with two quite different outcomes for treatments for children. In the 1990s, MedImmune was a small biotechnology company in Gaithersburg, Maryland, funded by venture capitalists, and became a publicly traded company in 1991. At that time, one of the lead programs was a monoclonal antibody to prevent respiratory syncytial virus infection in neonates. The research and development of this program was funded by SBIR Phase 1 and 2 grants. Today, this product is called Synagis, the first and only FDA-approved product to prevent an infectious disease, and has been used now in over 600,000 children. MedImmune employs thousands of highly skilled professionals. If current SBIR rules prevailed at the time when MedImmune scientists first were working on and applied for these grants, MedImmune would have been ineligible to receive those SBIR funds, and it would have significantly impacted the development of the program in the company. Contrast this with the outcome at AGTC. Today, AGTC is a small private biotechnology company in Alachua, Florida. It is developing cutting-edge product candidates to treat and cure different genetic diseases using adeno-associated viral vectors produced by the proprietary manufacturing process. The company, by all parameters, is a small company. They have 7 employees, no product revenues, and large capital requirements to advance their programs through early-stage preclinical and clinical development. Currently, all their venture capital money is being used to fund 2 early clinical trials, and they have no other capital to support other avenues of research. Prior to 2003, AGTC received several SBIR grants for 3 different projects to advance treatments for rare diseases. But in 2003, the company applied for a Phase 1/2 grant and was initially awarded the grant, but the application had to be withdrawn due to the circumstances of VC ownership. This grant would have advanced the treatment for Pompe's disease, a fatal genetic disorder which results in the death of many infants by 1 year of age. No investors were willing to fund this early-stage work for Pompe's, and no further work has been done in the last 8 years. Currently, the company is working on one of the most promising programs to treat blindness in children caused by genetic disorders. An initial clinical study using their technology to treat Leber's congenital amaurosis, LCA, a rare retinal disease affecting a few thousand patients in the U.S., resulted in the first restoration of partial sight in legally blind patients with this inherited defective gene. The company desires to use their technology to treat 3 other genetic eye diseases, but are unable to do so because they have no resources available and they can't participate in the SBIR funding. In fact, AGTC did apply for a grant for one of these eye diseases called achromatopsia in anticipation of congressional resolution of matters of SBIR funding related to VC ownership. The grant was scored and awarded, but AGTC is unable to accept the funds due to the prevailing rules. As developers of the next generation of treatments for diseases that would have been unapproachable just a decade ago, we need to find ways to support these risky transformational therapies that could improve the lives of children and adults suffering from genetic disorders, infectious diseases, cancer, and autoimmune diseases, among others. This has personal and economic benefits to the individuals affected, the organizations and companies working on these initiatives, and society in general. We should update the SBIR program to reflect today's realities, and this has never been more important. The impact of the economic downturn is still being felt by the industry. The amount of venture capital dollars decreased by 27% between 2009 and 2010, and finding funding for promising early-stage projects is still difficult as it has ever been. There is an opportunity to strengthen and restore the SBIR program. First, allow small U.S. biotechnology companies that are majority owned by venture capitalists to once again compete for the SBIR awards based on scientific merit. This will ensure that the most competitive pool of applicants and grants will be awarded for projects that show the most promise in bringing breakthrough therapies to the public. Second, clarify SBIR eligibility rules to make the application process more straightforward and user-friendly. It is equally important that the reauthorization clarifies SBIR affiliation regulations.
Thank you for your testimony, Dr. Koenig. I'd like to begin questioning with Mr. Norum. Technologies such as yours, and really technologies in general, tend to advance exponentially. Where could you see your technology going? Where else could it be adapted?
Thank you for the question, Chairwoman Ellmners. We believe, and our investors believe, that we have a very rare opportunity to expand the physical security levels of our nation, not only at Department of Defense military bases, the State Department on embassies worldwide, both here and abroad, but also for our communities as they want to deploy this in universities for increased security on our campuses, hospitals in local jurisdictions, police departments, K-12 education. So it's a very open market, both state, local, and federal here in the United States, not to mention the growth of the surveillance and sensor grid arrays that are being built in Europe and other places in the world.
Thank you. To Dr. Brewer, we've been really focusing on job creation. That's the main focus of the 112th Congress. Could you put your SBIR award into jobs? Upon receipt of a Phase 1 or a Phase 2, does that directly impact your hiring practices?
Of course, we can put SBR directly into jobs we have. Yes, the Phase 1, Phase 2 awards do affect our hiring practices and make a major contribution to just how far we can extend our own technology. So very significant to that, very significant to the job creation.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Link, agency flexibility is often cited as a value to the SBIR program. Can you explain how this flexibility is beneficial to the program across agencies?
If one talked to a group of entrepreneurs, each would probably have a different definition of what an entrepreneur is. The same if you talk to those in the academic community who study it. A common thread among those definitions would be the ability to be creative and the ability to bring that creativity into action, in this case the marketplace. And I think the flexibility of the SBIR program embraces both of those. It embraces both creativity and it embraces both action. It allows for 2 phases. It allows for firms to attempt to try out new ideas and, if successful, then follow them forward into a Phase 2. It also allows for other support, whether it be federal or federal non-SBIR money or other forms of private investment. And there is not a formula that is presupposed on how those other forms of financing will have an effect. The market is playing itself out as it should, and the success, I think, has been well documented by the members of this committee.
Thank you, Dr. Link. And lastly, Dr. Koenig, have you seen businesses increasingly seeking out more opportunities in the SBIR program because of the general lack of availability of capital nationwide at this time?
I think the effect of the economic downturn has had a dramatic effect on the biotechnology industry. The lack of funds available from other sources, particularly venture capitalists, has ended up forcing the companies to seek other ways to obtain new sources of capital. And I have seen a lot of effort in trying to get SBIR fundings, but because of the current rules and most of the companies that are within the bio organization are major owned by venture capitalists, they've been prohibited from participating. So that has been a great frustration, as you can imagine, for the member companies. And I think that in the interests of both the companies creating new jobs, getting the most innovative technologies developed, I think that if the rules can be changed to allow the major funded VC companies to participate, I think will have a huge impact on our country and the public.
Thank you, Dr. Koenig. I now yield to Ranking Member Richmond for his questions.
Madam Chairwoman, if I could, I'd yield to Congressman Peters to do his before me.
Thank you, Ranking Member Richmond. Appreciate that. Thank you, panelists, for your comments here. Dr. Link, I just want to flesh out some of the things that you mentioned in your analysis of the SBIR program. One, you talked about how the average annual rate of employment growth varies across funding agencies, and I think you quoted the NIH as about 11% growth. I don't know if that correlated to jobs. What sort of variation do you see in these agencies? Is there a wide variation?
NIH was the largest, and it's the agency I studied the most. Defense Department is about 5%, and Department of Energy is about 6%. NASA and the National Science Foundation are in between.
And what do you account for that difference? Anything particular?
Well, first of all, NIH and Department of Defense are the 2 agencies. Projects funded from those 2 agencies have received the most amount of Phase 3 money. And I think that has a dramatic effect on the probability of commercialization. When one talks about commercialization, it's not a dichotomous event. It's not you either commercialize or don't commercialize. If you do commercialize, how successful are you in reaching the market? And in those two agencies, which of course are the largest in terms of allocations, they have been most successful in terms of the magnitude of sales. And I attribute that primarily to Phase 3 funding in those two agencies more so than in the others.
And to pick up on that, you quoted about per $1 million of investment is 30 jobs. Now, is that folks that are just getting Phase 1 and 2, or is that looking at Phase 3 as well? And does that skew the job number because of the Phase 3 funding is really, in some respects, most important when it comes to job creation?
Those numbers take into account Phase 3 money. And I don't think it skews the numbers because I'm talking first about an average, and the variance around that 30 is relatively small. It's a point estimate, but I think it's a very good approximation across funding agencies. And we've looked at the data from the early 1990s to the present, and so I feel very comfortable with that as a soundbite.
Right, yeah. But the Phase 3 obviously is critical, not being done by all agencies. Are there recommendations that you have to this committee as to maybe looking at structuring it to ensure that other agencies are engaged in Phase 3 funding? And I'll open this up to all the panelists too, that because commercialization is the key thing when it comes to jobs. And the bottom line, we want to create jobs, and small businesses are the engine of growth. I serve on the Financial Services Committee and deal with financing issues all the time, which is very difficult right now if you're a small business person to get the loans you need. Do we need to have a focus on that Phase 3 to get our best bang for our dollar, and how do we do it? And just some ideas that any of the panelists have would be appreciated.
Well,
why don't you go?
let me just finish. I think it is open across agencies. We just don't see much venture capital among DOD and NASA projects compared to the others. An issue tied to Phase 3 is trying to shorten the time period between Phase 1 and Phase 2. Shortening that time period helps companies retain employees, and I think that's very important. Another issue associated with Phase 3 funding across all agencies is consistency in the funding of the SBIR program, not going through the temporary period from 2008 to the present time. And the reason for that is venture capital firms, as well as other private equity and investment firms, they span companies that have received SBIR awards. The SBIR award is, in a sense, a seal of good housekeeping approval. It does send a positive signal to the marketplace. And companies are willing to, venture capital companies in particular, are willing to invest in the time and effort to study those projects that have been funded and to approach those that appear to be the most successful.
So I have a sort of a mixed view with regard to the requirements for SBIR Phase 3 funding per se. I have found historically, both in my own experiences with getting funds for SBIR 1 and 2, that this has a huge impact. I think the validation is very important to the VC community. But beyond that is the ability to have these funds to fund very early stage programs and move them far enough along that you can actually have results that can be endorsed and are attractive not only for the venture capitalists to fund, but for other larger biotechnology companies or pharmaceutical companies to engage with these companies. So I think what happens is that there's an amplifying effect that once you've actually conducted that research that's been funded by Phase 1 and 2, it helps to mature those early stage work to a point where that it now has some validation to be more attractive to larger sources of capital, both in the venture community as well as the biotech and pharmaceutical industries.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very good. I now recognize Mr. Mulvaney.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairwoman. Gentlemen, before I come back to the venture capital question that I want to follow up on, I want to ask a general question. I'm a small businessman. I've participated in an SBA program before. It's not the one we're talking about here today. And I would classify my experience as fair. Could have been better. I've heard some really good stories about some things the SBA does well. I've heard some stories about things that are not administered as well as they could be. Tell me, how hard is it to use this program? Is this a relatively easy program to use? I mean, y'all are in small business. Does it make sense to you, or is it one of those things you got to fill out 15 different forms and it's a complete disaster? Tell me about the experience of actually using the SBIR process and whether or not we can improve it. And anybody, Dr. Koenig.
I have to say I have been involved with SBR funding since the early 1990s, so I have a very long view of this. And I remember telling one of my colleagues back in 1994, musing that I said this was the jewel of the government. I had, there's always criticisms about government-supported programs. But what I saw, the impact of that program and the ease in terms of applications and getting the funding made this a wonderful resources. Move forward to 2003 when the rules changed, and I was actually very depressed about it because I saw tinkering in a program that was so successful. The actual application process is quite easy. I mean, we mostly dealt with the SBIRs through the NIH, and this is not any more difficult. It's in fact less difficult than most grant submissions. And the actual administration of that funding, getting the awards, has been quite easy. So I have not heard any issues with regarding the administrative aspects of the granting process.
Gentlemen? Yes, sir.
We work primarily with the Department of Defense, and I have to say, and I would speak for my colleague, that it's been a great agency to work with. Sometimes they are short of administrative help themselves, but for the recipient, it's a very helpful process, very encouraging with their support, and it's been, I think, a very solid program for our company.
Dr. Brewer, you want to check in on this, or is it pretty much the same? Or?
Well, first, yes, I want to echo pretty much the same. We've worked with a broader range of agencies, found that kind of experience across the board. Okay. And we also do non-SBR government contracts. And if you compare the two, I'd say SBR is certainly a jewel in the crown, I think it was said.
No,
it's very good.
That's good to know. Then let's come to the issue that Dr. Koenig has talked about at length, and I know each of you touched on it a little bit. If we wanted to fix it, do you just get rid of Section 107? Do you get rid of the 35% caps, or is there another way? That do you throw all the 2000 rule changes out and go back to the way it was before? Or I mean, if we decide that we'd like to try and take this up, what are your recommendations about the best, most efficient way to proceed?
Well, I personally would love to throw the rules back and go pre-2003. Obviously, I know that this has been a very difficult process to change. I mean, we've been discussing this since 2003. I've actually appeared before the committee several years ago, and we're now 8 years beyond and haven't resolved the issue. So, what I believe and what Bio believes is let's find a pathway forward that allows participation as much as we can for major VC-owned companies. If the Senate and the House can come to a solution that gets away with it, of course we would endorse it, but any ability to have VC majority-owned companies participate at this point would be very favorable.
And I've only got about half a minute left, so let me ask this. Are there any other changes of the 2003 rules that we should be looking at primarily, or is this VC rule the one that seems to be the sticking point for most folks in your industry? Mr. Norm.
I would encourage you to look at the definition of venture capital firms themselves. When we call on family offices, wealthy individuals who have a propensity to do this in angel capital, they form LLCs to protect themselves legally. They hire professional managers. They make more than one investment. And so many of the angel capital investors are now deemed venture capital. So it's just another barrier for us to raise capital and participate in the SBIR program if that definition is too loosely interpreted.
Dr. Brewer, I'm out of time, so I'm going to let the chairwoman take it from here. So,
I'm going to yield some time to Mr. Richmond for some questions that he has as well.
I guess I would start with, have you all had a chance to review the draft legislation that would come out of this committee? And in that legislation, if you have some ideas of changes, please go ahead and offer it. But one of the things that I noticed that's different in this legislation than the previous legislation was a 90-day window that they would have to respond. Do you think that will expedite things, or do you think that that could have some potential negatives to it? Dr. Brewer.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think the shortening the time of response will be a real advantage.
And Dr. Link, I think that, oh, did you want to respond, Dr.?
I had nothing to respond to the 90, but you asked about other
Yes.
changes. And I don't, and this is actually not a opinion endorsed by BIA. This is actually my personal opinion. I remember in the markup of last year's legislation, there was a limitation of VC companies that were affiliated with large corporations, and there had to be less than a 20% ownership of the small companies by these large affiliated. I think this is just a very arbitrary rule, and I really, from a personal opinion, should be excluded. In fact, AGTC, which I described before, would not be able to now participate because there is one VC, a large corporation associated entity that owns a little more than 20%. And so, again, the arbitrary nature of this doesn't seem very useful for such companies.
The other thing that I noticed in the bill, and I would assume you all are going to say it's a very good thing, but I want to make sure, is the increase in the Phase 1 and Phase 2 grant amounts. Do you think it's a sufficient increase? Do you think it was a necessary increase?
The costs of doing research have escalated, and I think I wholly endorse the amounts here. Again, knowing where we are in terms of the economy and issues with regarding funding new programs, I think there will be limitations and pushback. So any additional funding is well deserved in supporting this program. But obviously, you have to deal with the realities of funding such programs.
Go ahead, Dr. Link.
Yes, I agree with the increase in the limits. I also agree with the inflation escalation that's suggested for funding. If I may have a little breadth in my answer here, there's another part of the proposed bill that gives directors discretion for a 50% increase in those amounts. I did not see in the bill, perhaps it is there, information with regard to oversight on how that 50% may be monitored, what kind of accountability may take place there. An alternative idea may be, in the spirit of accountability, to allow those companies that are invited for Phase 2 awards that look very promising and perhaps in the spirit of the purpose of the agency need additional funding, be invited to propose 2 Phase 2 awards, one for the maximum amount and one for 50% greater than that maximum amount, and then have both of them scored rather than have the discretion for the agency to go above the amount without any oversight associated with that.
Thank you for that. Mr. Norm.
If I could respond to that, I think, speaking for the DOD programs and SBIR, The administrators themselves have oversight, and as long as they have the discretion on the size of award, they do a very good job, we find, at managing the appropriate amount of money that gets assigned to each program. So the discretion of the administrator would be my recommendation.
The last question I'll ask, because we keep talking about venture capital a lot, and it's very clear that VCs play an important role in helping these companies start up. One of the other shining stars, at least in my experience through federal programs, is the new market tax credit. And I was wondering how large of a role new market tax credit allocations play in this area. And two, and you don't necessarily have to answer this now, but do you see a way in the future we could link or make some provisions in new market tax credit allocations for this area of technology or in this area? Because I think that when you talk about job growth and benefit to the country, this is very significant. The rules on new market are very open, and what you can invest in is a large area. Would it make sense to direct or incentivize new market tax credit companies to look at this area? And just, Dr. Koenig.
I think that tax credits is a great incentive, but in general, but in the context of the companies we're talking about, they can't get to use these tax credits because it takes over a decade for most of these companies to actually realize any revenue if they're successful. So unless there is an ability to take those tax credits and assign them or sell them or some way of actually helping the company indirectly to bring in more resources, I don't see an immediate impact on the company.
No, what the New Markets program does is allow venture capital companies to raise.
I see. Yes.
So the VCs raise money
yeah.
through New Markets, but those VCs are allowed to invest that capital that they raise in a number of things, from housing to Lowe's to clothing stores. And I guess I'm asking if this is such a jewel, should we try to find a way to incentivize those VCs to look in this area in terms of investing their money? And after you all answer the question, Madam Chairwoman, I will yield back.
Ranking Member Richmond, I can only comment that as an entrepreneur and living in the state of Texas, we've got a lot of state programs that encourage and foster innovation and encourage entrepreneurs like ourselves in Texas. We have found that encouraging and linking those programs, providing additional access to capital for the entrepreneurs, has been very helpful across the board. And we are in a very severe time to raise. It's very tough to raise capital today in this economy, and I think all of those programs help a great deal.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one follow-up question for Dr. Brewer. In regard to commercialization, there has been a lot of debate about so-called SBIR mills, companies that simply win multiple Phase 1 awards, very few Phase 2 awards, but don't commercialize much. I've heard both sides of this argument, but as a participant in the SBIR program, do you view this as a problem?
Thank you. It's a good question. The short answer is no, I don't view it as a problem. Yes, it exists, but I think it's a very poor business model, so those mills aren't going to be around for a long time anyway. So it's there. I don't see it as a significant problem.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, in conclusion, thank all of you for participating today. The SBIR and STTR programs are widely supported and recognized as one of the country's most important engines of innovation. Today was the second step in our committee's effort to fully reauthorize these important initiatives. As Chairman Graves said at our previous hearing, we plan to work quickly yet thoroughly over the next several weeks to get this legislation on the House floor in May and ultimately to get a bill to the President's desk as soon as possible. Thank you all again, and I ask unanimous consent that the members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered, this hearing is now adjourned.